So, good morning. I'm here with Chris Spear, the head of the American Trucking Association. And Chris, I can't think of a time in American history, I guess maybe World War II and a couple others, where trucking was pretty important. But what is going on in your world right now, where everybody's wondering where their stuff is coming from?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on, Shailen. This is truly a historic period. 2020 is not ending the way we started. We had a lot of optimism coming into the year with a couple trade agreements in hand, with more manufacturing, most likely that we would be in a better position to end the year more like 2018. Now we, have been dealing with COVID-19 for the last two and a half months. We've never experienced anything quite like this, with the government at federal, state, and local level weighing in to shut down the economy. And yet we are expected to continue to, stock the shelves, make certain that the test kits and emergency gear are all delivered to EMTs, nurses, doctors in the hospitals. So getting from point A to B has been a very, very difficult environment to navigate. And we've been working with the White House Task Force now since its inception, and have gotten a lot of cooperation to allow our industry certain exemptions, designations as essential, certainly help, particularly at the state and local level, where we had a lot of governors and mayors that were making decisions that were very adverse to interstate commerce, very adverse to the supply chain. So we were able to work through those problems very quickly, reopen public rest areas, DMVs that were shut. We've gotten exemptions on the issuance of CDLs, CLPs, medical certificates. These are all things that keep our drivers operating and fleets, moving without as few government impediments as possible. So definitely a historic time we haven't witnessed. We've had to work at every level of government to keep our fleets and drivers moving. So we're very much looking forward to a return to normalcy, if there is one.
Yeah, you you started out talking about 2020 not being a great year. I've heard a lot of people saying, "Can we just hit Control Alt Delete and go back and just start this bad boy all over again?" Yeah, I think that I think people often take for granted the truckers that bring their food and goods that they consume, because I think when we think about transportation, we often think about our own personal trips. We don't think about the trips of those goods that get there. How are your folks holding up? Are they shouldering the burden and carrying on? Are the cracks starting to show?
Yeah, we're starting to see cracks. There were certain elements of the industry, as it's very diverse, that we're experiencing almost immediately, a negative trend. If you were serving customers such as brick and mortar retail, you were definitely beginning to see adverse impacts on the freight contracts that you may have had. Fewer people are driving, so our industry that moves fuel from the rack all the way to service stations has been really slowed, very impacted. Even agriculture, in certain respects, certainly exports. Intermodal at ports are definitely seeing adverse impact. But those in our industry that are serving grocery, that are serving e-commerce, for instance, a lot of people are home, so they're ordering everything online. We have certain segments of the industry that are still doing pretty well, but there's a cliff coming, and it really now comes down to balancing a safe and responsible reopening with the speed. Speed is really key for us. If we don't have customers, particularly those medium and small businesses that we serve around the country, you're not going to have a trucking industry there to support them. We will start seeing companies shut as a result of not having business. And so it's not sustainable long term. And so I think speed is very important. Balancing that with the safety and well-being of the public is really key.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that we, all of my time as Secretary of Transportation in a couple of states, we always have to find that fine balance between speed and safety. And at ITS America, we often talk about technology. So in Colorado, we had the first, what I call the world's first commercial autonomous vehicle delivery. Other folks call it the beer run. But I've been reading a lot of stories about technology out there. A lot of states doing platooning, allowing platooning with trucks right now. What are you hearing on the technology side? How is technology playing a role for truckers right now?
It's pretty pivotal. I think that technology is an enabler. It allows our industry to operate more safely, more environmentally friendly, certainly more efficiently. And we look at technology as a catalyst for our future growth, and believe that that is going to drive a lot of change within the industry. And I think much of it's good. We're not adverse to it. I'm not one to forecast, but I really find it difficult to believe that full automation level 5 is on the horizon anytime soon. I'm not all that concerned about displacement of drivers, largely because 2/3 of the accidents that involve commercial vehicles are caused by passenger vehicles. So we would envision change coming more rapidly in the passenger vehicle side in terms of full automation before we would see it in the commercial vehicles. I just don't think you want to turn loose an 80,000-pound vehicle with no one in it while people are still driving their cars. I think that would be an imbalance that we just don't see happening in that order. There's also a national security element to it. You have a lot of trucks that are hauling hazardous material, for instance, whether it be fuel, chemicals, and so on. I don't think those types of cargo you would want unattended in a threat environment like we have. So there are elements to our industry that I think would gain tremendously from levels 3 perhaps, and that's within reach. I believe good automation, especially on the long haul, can create a lot of efficiencies that would be of interest to our fleets to procure that kind of technology and deploy it. And it's definitely doable. We've seen a lot of instances. You cited the run in Colorado. We've got a lot of testing going on in multiple states right now that strike us as pretty promising. But I think it's a balance of safety, efficiency, environmentally impactful equipment. Those are all gains that we see. But as far as displacement, not altogether that concerned.
Yeah, I remember doing trucking radio on Sirius XM with Big Dog or something like that, and
Road
um,
dog.
yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. And I agree with you completely. I think that automation is one facet, and I think we're going to have truck drivers in trucks for a long time, just like we still have pilots in a lot of the planes. Uh, However, I do think that on those long haul trips, there's room. There's also in addition to automation, we have connected vehicle. There's a lot of platooning that's taking place, and I agree with you. We talk about a vision for the world that is safer, greener, and smarter because of technology. And I think we're going to be getting there. Another issue that we've had a lot of conversations about, and we appreciate ATA, is the preserving the 5.9 safety spectrum, for transportation and safety critical messaging. Why is this so important for the trucking industry?
Well, I think it speaks to a whole host of returns that we find worth pursuing, and we think the 5.9 platform is the most immediate way to connect cars with trucks, with infrastructure. So the V2X, V2V, V2I, all these platforms could be possible almost immediately with 5.9 capabilities. Preserving all 7 channels for safety, we believe would be the most notable gain, the most notable return. I believe there are a whole host of efficiencies with respect to the bottlenecks, the top 100 bottlenecks around the country. Generally can be caused not only from small accidents. Rubbernecking can certainly cause inordinate delays for people to get into work, but it also translates into what we pay for our goods on the shelf. The more time that's stuck in traffic, those costs get eventually passed on to consumers. So there's a tremendous amount of economic gain that comes from the ability to control traffic in a way where it's not slowed or perhaps repercussions from an accident, for instance. Those bottlenecks can be alleviated. We also look at 5.9 as a way to build our future infrastructure, not just the current repairs that are in dire need, but in terms of new roads, new bridges, new bypasses, the ability to connect infrastructure with trucks and cars also has tremendous gains. So we look at 5.9 as a very realistic approach that could be achieved just in the coming years. 5G also, certainly promising, but we believe these 7 channels of 5.9, if the FCC were to actually take the recommendations of industry, but also the Department of Transportation, and preserve that, safety would be the foremost gain, we believe.
Yeah, people ask me why we're so passionate about preserving the spectrum, why we're fighting so hard. I mean, if you look at the stats, 38,000 American deaths, we know that connected vehicles can drop that down, and that obviously has a freight component. We know that all the emissions that come from all that delay. But I think what most Americans don't realize is that about 60% of congestion comes from non-recurring incidents. It's crashes that are happening every day, and then everybody's stuck in traffic. And so, yeah, if we can preserve that spectrum, I think there'll be a very good outcome. You talked about investment there. So last question, what's sort of your crystal ball around getting an authorization, and what are you looking for from an ATA perspective around the next authorization from a transportation perspective?
Well, I think I'm optimistic. I have to be. It's a top tier pursuit for our industry, and will continue to be until it's achieved. And so we're going to continue to carry the message as long as there's air in our lungs. We feel very strongly about investing in our infrastructure, and not just roads and bridges, but the connectivity between modes is very, very pivotal. And we've seen that transformation just in the last 10, 15 years. Yet our federal government has done little to nothing to keep up with those growing changes. We haven't raised the fuel tax since 1993. It had never been, up until recently, a political issue. Roads and bridges are not Democrat or Republican. We all drive on them. Ronald Reagan, the patriarch of the Republican Party, clearly felt compelled to invest in infrastructure. He raised the fuel tax during his administration twice. So where are we now as opposed to the Reagan administration? We're in an environment where we have a lot of elected officials in Congress that took no new revenue pledges. Why you do that, I'm sure they had their reasons. I think in instances like COVID-19, where the immediate reaction is to release liquidity into the marketplace, over $3 trillion, and it wasn't even paid for. It was put on the government's credit card. So our kids, their kids are going to have to pay for this. We're coming forward with a paid-for infrastructure bill. We're not going to put it on the debt. We believe very strongly that it can be funded at the rack or at the pump. You could bake into the price of fuel, where we pick up fuel and take it to service stations. A nickel a year over 4 years would generate $340 billion in new revenue over 10 years. That's brand new money, and it would shore up the trust fund, which is going to go broke next year. It wouldn't add a dime to the deficit. It's immediate. You'd immediately have money in every state account to fund repairs, but also new infrastructure projects. Brings certainty. That kind of investment would generate a tremendous amount of economic returns, environmental benefits, safety benefits, all very measurable. But it also really add a tremendous amount of job growth, roughly 500,000 construction jobs nationwide at a time now under COVID-19, where we have over 33 million people filing for unemployment insurance. I can't think of a better issue to put forward. I think the president feels strongly. House Democrats, I believe, are generally aligned with that. I really think it comes down to conservatives that took these no new revenue pledges are going to be the biggest headwind in getting it done. I think we can get a reauthorization bill done. To me, without the money, it's not infrastructure. You've got to fund it. You got to pay for it. So we're going for the full boat on this. I think it's doable. And I think the environment right now is right for it for all the reasons I just cited.
Yeah, I've often said that we have a transportation system that was designed in the 50s, built in the 60s for a population of the 1980s. And what we need to do is invest in a 21st century transportation system. And that's not going to be doable with the budgets that we had from the 20th century. And so I agree with you completely. And we've worked together on a number of issues. And I look forward to working with you on reauthorization and how we come out of this. And I would just say, when you're communicating with your members, please express our appreciation to all of them for keeping America moving and keeping all the shelf stock, because we really appreciate what they're doing.
Thanks, Shailen. I appreciate it. And ITS has been an outstanding partner all along on all these issues. And I look forward to continuing that relationship as we get through the COVID crisis and kind of return to some of these issues. I'm really excited that we're going to have an opportunity to pass some of these bills. So look forward to working with you.
All right. Well, you stay safe.
Take care.